Hi everybody, my friends got together and bought me this Rover 100 track car in secret. To celebrate, I booked a private track day at Blyton Park and invited you to come along. And the legends that you are, you sold it out in 12 hours. I was worried we weren't going to have enough people. So much is the demand, I have now booked a second date at Blyton for November the 3rd, giving you a little bit more time to get ready. So, if you'd like to join me, my friends, and the mighty Metro at Blyton for a little bit of fun, please follow the link in the description down below or send me an email. Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody. If you take even a quick glance at the automotive news today, there is one story you cannot escape. EVs. Because it would appear that the rise of the electric car has not only stopped, in some cases it appears to be reversing. Manufacturers, with almost no exception now, have all got an electric car. But consumers are looking at them and saying, thanks, but no thanks. And this is down to a near lethal combination of high purchase price, high running price, insane depreciation, and the simple fact that a lot of customers just don't want an EV. It would appear we've now reached a breaking point, and something's gotta give. But what makes this whole situation so unbelievably painful to watch unfolding is the fact that I believe 10 years ago, we had the perfect solution. We'd got it cracked, but we instead took a path that I think was utterly and totally moronic and doomed to fail. So, what happened? What in JayEmm's Britain would I do? And how is it that the eGolf has given me this incredible moment of clarity? Well, find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. Now, I've no particular interest in going over things you're already likely more than familiar with. But in summary, here in Britain, and is the case in most of Europe, there is an agreement that by 2035, in just 10 years' time, car makers will no longer sell anything with a combustion engine in it. Their produce will be 100% electric, or zero emission, which at the moment realistically does mean just electric. I know many have talked about hydrogen, some have tried it, but the reality is that I think has even more issues associated with it, and I think may end up being, for consumers at least, a dead-end technology. But though I firmly believe much of what's going on at the minute is somewhat misguided, I think it has been done with good intentions, because we do have some fairly serious issues that we need to take care of. Now, there'll always be those out there who deny that anything bad is happening and the planet is absolutely fine and will carry on just well with or without us. But that, I think, really is not the case. Now, I love driving classic cars. I've been out in one this morning, a gorgeous 1975 Mini. Yesterday, I drove a car that was 108 years old. And whenever I feature one of these, they go past and you get that whiff of unburnt hydrocarbon, and as a man that loves his cars, I go, oh yeah, that's fantastic. But the truth is, would I want 1,000 of those going past my house every single day? No, I wouldn't. I've been places in the world where that's still sort of how things are. It's not nice. I know we'd all love to live in this world where you could drive a Formula 1 car down the street, the noise of a glorious V12 bouncing off the walls, and have everybody come out to wave and cheer at you. But that's not the world we live in. I believe a really important part of being able to enjoy our hobby is by enjoying it responsibly, demonstrating a little bit of self-restraint and appreciating that maybe not everybody likes the things that you do, or perhaps even maybe they do, and today they're just not in the mood. But I do also believe that when it comes to real big issues like the environment, it's very, very easy to boil things down to the point of oversimplification. Oh, and as it happens, we're just passing my accommodation for the week. You see, this video is one of many that I've been making courtesy of my good friends Doug and Kath. This is in fact her car. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment. And they've invited me out here to Shillington, which is on the Bedfordshire-Hertfordshire border, put me up in their lovely little Airbnb, which I'll put a link to in the description down below, and hooked me up with a few of their car-owning friends. It's been a great week, so thank you guys. Okay then, back to the environment. And again, this is an area where things are quite a bit more complicated than many make out, but the one number that's often focused on is CO2. We have now subsequently learned that things like NOx are in some ways a lot more awful and evil. Just in case you weren't aware, that's what you got out the back of old diesels that used to run nice and lean. Yeah, they gave you 70 mpg, but at quite some cost. You see, NOx hangs down on the ground, and that means that small people, i.e. children, suffer them an awful lot more than we do. And this is why in places like London, where they now have an ultra-low emission zone in place, you often can drive a 20-year-old petrol, but maybe not a 10-year-old diesel. And it is places exactly like London where I think the mistake has been made. Because you see, I do genuinely believe that London should be working towards a zero emissions future. You go inside the M25 and I think it is a good thing for all of the people that live there that you're either in something like a hybrid in electric mode, a full EV, a hydrogen car, in short, something that isn't chucking horrible shit out the back. And yeah, I know, you may be driving around in a little 1 litre Corsa thinking, what is it that I'm doing? Surely I'm not contributing that much, and you probably aren't, but it's a cumulative effect. And having lived in London, I can say that the air quality is notably worse than in the countryside, where I wouldn't mind my neighbour starting up their V12 Lamborghini. But in London, or I probably wouldn't mind either, but that's going to have more of an impact, particularly because they're not really going to get very far very fast, are they? And this to me really highlights the issue. It is the fact that we're trying to deal with this one problem as if it is one problem, when it's not. It's two problems. It's local emissions and global emissions. You see, I often hear people talking about carbon neutral sustainable fuel as if it's some kind of magic bullet. And every time somebody says, well, let's just do this carbon capture fuel, it'll fix everything, I look at them and think, you're a moron. Because on a planetary scale, it works. Now, there are a few different ways you can make synthetic fuel, but one of the more popular ones, and the one that often people talk about, is effectively taking carbon out of the atmosphere, you turn that into a fuel, you then burn it, and effectively what you've taken out of the atmosphere, you put back in. So you are net zero. Now, I love the idea of that, and I think that's something we need to keep exploring, keep developing. And if I were driving somewhere like here, in an old Ferrari or whatever, that's great, that's perfect, because here, pollution isn't so much of a problem. But in London, it is, and guess what? You fuel up an old Lamborghini Countach with sustainable fuel, and what comes out the back of it is just as bad as if you were to put 102 octane in it. And that's the local side of things. You could convert every single petrol car in London to sustainable fuel, it wouldn't change the emissions out the back of the thing. That's why I think in London, EVs are a good idea, or hybrids that have an ability, for a little while at least, to run on pure electric power. This makes to me near total and complete sense. What doesn't, and what never has, is telling everybody, everywhere, no matter what you do or who you are, that you have to have an EV. And this, I think, has led us down an incredibly self-destructive path. Now, trying to cite hard and fast numbers is incredibly difficult because by the time you do find them, there's a good chance they're out of date. Volvo, or Polestar, did a long time ago publish a study which said there is a certain cutoff point you need to reach before an EV actually becomes overall better in terms of things like CO2 than a regular combustion engine vehicle. And this is largely down to the fact that to build an EV involves an awful lot more effort than to build a combustion car. The truth is there are a huge number of variables in this, and over time the process of building EVs has got an awful lot better. Combustion cars haven't advanced anywhere near as much, and of course there's a big difference between running your EV on coal power or solar. Mitsubishi, I believe, recently published a study in which they said if you do live somewhere which can run on 100% renewable, particularly in Norway, and even here in Britain we've managed to achieve it on a few occasions, running an EV on a planetary scale makes total and complete sense. However, if you live somewhere where your primary power source is derived from dirtier fuels such as coal, so China and Australia, things then don't make quite so much sense. And this, hopefully, is all fairly logical, fairly sensible stuff. I don't believe that anything I have said thus far is particularly radical or revelatory. So then, what is it that I'm talking about? Why is it that I feel we had the solution 10 years ago? Well, it's because of cars like this, the eGolf. Now, over the years, VW have experimented a number of times with electric versions of their cars, but often they were very niche, bespoke things for people with very, very particular needs, and they never sold in anything approaching mass market numbers. However, come the 6th generation of the Golf, they realized that the EV thing was coming, so they started to experiment, built a few prototypes. And then, for the Mark 7 in 2014, they released the eGolf. And what I love about it is that it really is what you think it is. It's a Golf, but electric. To look at it, you'll just see a Golf. The only signs it's anything other than a normal one are the lack of tailpipes at the back, which you might not get in some models anyway, the blue stripe at the front, kind of like the red one on a GTI, and the eGolf badging. It doesn't even have the green plate of piety on it. Open the door and you'll be greeted with what looks like standard, in this case, Mark 7.5 Golf interior. This one has the optional digital display, and you even start it with a key. Yeah, flip open the blade, put it in, turn it, and it starts like a normal car. If you've never driven an electric car in your life, this would be a great place to start. It just does what you need it to. It's not particularly quick. This later car is around 130 horsepower, but it's still not particularly heavy. It weighs only 1,500 kilos. That, for some reference, is half a ton lighter than the Cupra Born that I tested a couple of months ago. The ride's a little bit fidgety, but by and large, this thing is very pleasant indeed. I sit a little bit higher, likely because of where they've had to hide the battery pack. If you open the bonnet, you'll also see there's some big gaps in there where a gearbox would normally go, but they don't need to put anything there, and the thing drives really quite nicely. Grip is all right, road manners are good. This really is just a Golf, only an electric one. Pop open the side and you won't find a filler flap, you'll instead find a standard Type 2 CCS port. Here in Europe now, the default charging standard. When it debuted, the car had a battery of only 24 kilowatt hours. In 2017, both it and the motor were upgraded. So this, a later example, now has a capacity of just under 35 kilowatt hours. That means in the real world, you've got a range of between 100 and about 150 miles, depending on usage, temperature, etc, etc, etc. In line then really with many EVs of about 10 years ago. And of course, back then people would look at these and go, oh, blimey, crikey, yeah, it's not really good enough, is it? The truth is, though, that for most people, it was good enough. And if you lived in an urban environment, if the reason you had a car was to take the kids to school, go do the shopping, commute to work, that generally was more than enough. And about 5 or 6 years ago, when I started driving EVs, there weren't as many charging points as there are now, but they were much cheaper, many free to help try and entice people into using them, and the ones that charged didn't charge much at all. This meant that although the car was a little bit more expensive than a regular one to buy, if you did live with it and keep a hold of it, you would certainly be saving money. And there is no better way to convince people to buy a new technology than saying you'll save money. Today, unfortunately, I try and talk people out of an EV because with most people getting a fairly short-term PCP or other finance deal, often 2 to 4 years, and them doing relatively low mileage, it is a statistical impossibility that they'll get even close to saving the money they've spent on buying an EV as opposed to a regular combustion engined car. In truth, the people I know today that tend to buy EVs do so more because of the performance, or that manufacturers are so desperate to sell them, they're doing some fairly cracking deals. But something like this, or the smaller VW Up, around town is absolutely perfect. This is so pleasant to drive, it's so nice to be in, it's quiet, it's comfortable. In fact, the only issue the Cath really has is because it is so quiet, you can hear the rattles in it. 0 to 60 is dispatched with in just under 10 seconds, and of course it doesn't really have a gearbox. It's got a B mode for extra regeneration, but that you also get in many a regular hybrid. And in fact, before this, Cath had a GTE, which is the sporty hybrid. That's got about 200 horsepower, so it's a bit quicker than this, but she found herself mostly enjoying the car when it was in full EV mode. So decided she wanted a car that was just more of that, hence buying the eGolf. Today, you can pick one of these up from about £8,500. Nice ones commanding somewhere in the teens. And I would wager that for the vast majority of people, this really is all the car that they would likely need. And I think this is the path we should have gone down. Encourage manufacturers to offer some kind of EV option, not telling people that every car that they make should be an EV, which then involves a cycle of stupidity. It's the opposite of Gordon Murray's cycle of lightness, in that if you have a car with a small engine, it weighs less, which means it performs better, so you can then put an even smaller engine in it, etc, etc, etc. With an EV, you get the exact opposite. People will demand the potential to be able to drive, should they need to, from here to Scotland on almost one tank. And so you've got to put a big battery pack in it. And that means in some cases you'll get nearly a ton just of battery packs in a car. To then move that, you need a big motor. But the big motor really is moving the battery packs as much as it's moving the rest of the car. So to move it with any kind of gusto, you need an even bigger motor. This then drains the battery packs quicker, which means you need a bigger battery pack, etc, etc, etc. You see what I'm getting at here. And EVs, just like every other kind of car, have been growing and growing and growing. They're getting bigger and bigger and bigger because people demand these big battery packs in them, so you need to build a big car that's capable of carrying the big battery pack. And although on the one hand this might be helping with the emissions problem, it's not solving the other big issue of our age, which is congestion. I for a long time have said I would like to see a new category of car introduced inspired by the K cars of Japan. So smaller, lower power, maybe shorter range cars which are designed chiefly for urban transportation, maybe which are limited to 60 mile an hour or so. So you can survive on the dual carriageway, but you don't really want to drive them there. And these will come with some kind of financial incentive. Maybe even make them cheaper to insure. Maybe even make it so that younger people can drive them too. And you see, when you have these smaller, lighter EVs with smaller, lower capacity battery packs, though sure the overall range isn't quite as great, you don't need the same rate of charge in them to be able to get some range out of them. By having cars which are less thirsty with smaller capacity battery packs, you can fill them relatively quickly. You don't have to plug the thing in to a 350 kilowatt charger. Manufacturers have been fudging the numbers for quite some time by quoting numbers that you'll get only in optimum scenarios with technology that sometimes isn't available to everybody. With something like this, just about anyone can charge the car from full, provided you've got access to a regular 13 amp outlet. If you then have solar panels, as Doug and Cath do, they can run the car effectively for free. And this is how EVs should have been done. We should have encouraged the development of small EVs aimed at urban environments. We should have acknowledged the fact that there were a number of people that needed a car like this, and so helped to incentivize them into buying it, not worrying about the people that live outside of urban areas who really are better suited by traditional combustion engine or hybrid vehicles. We should have allowed the technology to mature at a more natural pace, helped manufacturers get the cars built for the specific needs of people in the environment from which they're going to benefit the most by having a zero emissions vehicle. And, somewhat ironically, I think had we allowed EVs to remain a niche product aimed at particular consumers, as opposed to just telling everybody they must buy an EV regardless of whether they want one or not, we'd have cured one of their biggest problems, the rampant depreciation. You see, currently car makers are being told year on year an increasing amount of their sales have to be EV. If they're not, they're going to be fined. Consumers don't want EVs, so to persuade them into them, massive discounts are being done, and for some manufacturers they're also doing daft things. Ford, for example, are restricting sales of combustion engine cars to try and then fudge the numbers. To me, that is the automotive equivalent of solving a diversity problem by walking into the office and shooting all the men. Had EVs remained something that appealed to a small audience, were designed for urban customers and built specifically for their needs, there would be a much smaller quantity of them, which would mean there is greater demand and lower supply. This, business basics would then tell you, would keep the prices relatively high and then encourage people to want to buy one new, knowing their money is going to be a lot safer. And the simple fact is, EVs, though now a lot more mature than they were, are still fairly early on in the developmental cycle, at least in the modern age. 100 odd years ago, we actually had a fairly even split of EV and combustion engine vehicles. It was about 1/3 petrol, 1/3 electric, and 1/3 steam. The petrol ones actually being the least refined of all, but also the ones capable of going the furthest distance, and that's why they won out. By also not forcing everybody everywhere to have an EV, it might also enable the rollout of the infrastructure to be a little more planned, a little less chaotic, and hopefully a little bit better supported. Right now, in Britain at least, it's an utter and total mess. But it doesn't need to be that way. And at the end of the day, all I've ever wanted is for people to buy the vehicle that suits their needs. Of course, I don't think anybody that has to commute 250 miles a day should buy an EV. It's just not right for their needs. By the same token, I don't think anybody that lives in Mayfair should drive an AMG G63. All I ask for is a little bit of common sense. But I think that probably is asking a bit too much. As for the Golf, I think it's a really good car. Like the E-Up. This might be one of my favourite electric cars because it is what it says on the tin. It's just an electric Golf. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel, it's just trying to fill a need that some people have. And that's what I think EVs should be. Am I right? Am I wrong? Who knows? Anyway, answers down below. Don't forget to hit the like button as well, and if you haven't already, please subscribe too, and I shall see you for the next one. Bye-bye.